Where's my lighter? Season 2, everybody. Welcome.
We're here. We're doing it. I got my voice back.
Hi, Lindsay. Your voice is back. Thank God.
Yay.
We're ready to record. We're going to talk about some history, guys. I love history. Love history so much. It's so important.
It is. You're just such a dork sometimes.
I know. You guys, well, first of all, let's catch everybody up on what's been going on. The podcast has been really fun. It's been so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
We never thought it'd be going on for this long. I mean, I thought we'd just put a few little episodes out there into the universe. But, it's turned into something really cool.
It has. Toni, do you remember off the top of your head how many countries we got on there? Is it 8?
I feel like it's 8 or 9.
8 or 9 countries are listening.
And 30 states.
Yeah. It's very cool.
Over 30 states. I think it was 31 or 32 states. And lots of countries and states. And, we've been getting a lot of good feedback and a lot of emails and stuff like that. So that's been really fun. But can I tell you guys something? I'm getting scared. The more that the podcast is growing, the more I'm getting nervous about any type of retaliation or anything like that. So, it's kind of ties into what we're going to talk about today, because when I start getting scared like that, I have to remind myself that other cults and other religions and organizations use those same type of scare tactics, and that it's not something only unique to my church. And so that helps me.
Good. Don't be scared. And also maybe be scared. Because the more that we're finding out,
Maybe be scared.
maybe the creepier it gets.
No, I don't know. I mean, I just feel sad about hurting people's feelings and stuff like that, or
I don't feel bad about that because I don't know any of them, so that's definitely more of your experience. The more that I find out about stuff that I don't really understand what it is, that makes me nervous because I don't want to accidentally be poking at something that's way bigger than I can see.
right.
That shit scares me because I'm I don't want to accidentally mention something that is actually a way bigger deal or uncrack something,
I just have to remember they don't really have power. One of the things that sometimes loops into my mind is what if they're right and what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
And so I just have to remember that they do not have the authority of God. God is not speaking to them, and God is not giving them power to, give salvation or take salvation away. And so I don't need to be afraid.
Yeah. You don't need to
Mine's more a fear of spiritual damnation, but also a fear of, being sued, or a fear of being followed and stuff. I know in Scientology, that's one of the things that they do, is they really try to intimidate people. And this is also something that this church is known to do. And, I just don't want to, I'm just scared of that, honestly.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we're going to, today we're going to talk about Korea, and we're going to talk about, the history of Korea. The church that I went to was founded in Korea. And so there's a lot of churches that were founded around the same time as this church, and a lot of cult leaders around the same exact time. So, it kind of makes you wonder why Korea, why is this happening, all at once,
Yeah.
Let me just throw it out there that we are not historians, but we are history lovers and readers. And so we did a little bit of research, okay, guys? A little bit of research just to sort of get a context, okay? Because history is important. History is important. Let me repeat it again, because there's a lot of stuff happening in the world and people do not know history. and like one of the things even that the church would talk about is history repeats itself, but it's true. And like, if we don't learn from history, then it will continuously repeat itself. So anyway, we need to have a broader idea of the context of what was happening in Korea. And because Christianity in Korea is very interesting, and it's very, it has an uncommon story. So actually, Korea was ruled by Japan. And this is a little bit later than what you're talking about, like around 1910, 1945. From 1910 to 1945, Korea was ruled by the Japanese. Okay, guys, but the Japanese were not nice to the Koreans.
Yeah.
It was really...
Here, wait, go back before. I think it's important to say, in the late 1800s is when the Christian missionaries started coming over.
Right.
So they were introducing Korea at the time.
Right.
They were introducing the concept of Christianity for really like the first time. So this like Buddhist, tribal shamanism.
And philosophies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They were, so this is like the first time in like the 1800s.
Right.
That they were being taught like biblical Christianity.
Exposed to things, right? And I was actually reading, so Seventh-day Adventists came into Korea in around 1901. Jehovah's Witnesses came into Korea around 1912. Mormons came in 1956, and the Pentecostals came in 1937. And so those were like from Christian missionaries that came over. Okay, so then anyway, after that, so I'm really interested in the time of Japanese rule, because this is the time that An Sang-ho was born, and he is the leader of the Church of God, which is the church that I go to. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of that church, okay? Because he was born in 1918. So Japan ruled from 1910 to 1945, but like we said, they were not nice. So they took away, all the Koreans' freedom, and they forced all the Koreans to learn Japanese. And they also force, like some of the severe cases, they would force the Koreans to take Japanese names. And they were trying to get rid of the Korean, they're really trying to get rid of the Korean language and trying to get rid of the Korean names and, trying to make it Japanese. So that was actually one thing that the church used to justify that this was the truth. Because An Sang-ho was born in 1918, okay? Let me just explain this a little bit. The Japanese invasion during that time, they were trying to force that name to be erased from history. But see, that's important because at the time of Jesus, I don't know if you know this history, at the time of Jesus when he was born, the devil sent out somebody to kill Jesus. So then they had to like escape over to Egypt, right? They had to
actually why they were after Joseph and Mary was because Joseph was an immigrant, but
right.
It wasn't because of Jesus. It was because Joseph was breaking the law and living illegally in Egypt.
Okay. An angel appeared to Joseph in a dream, telling him to flee to Egypt because the king, I don't know why I was going to say emperor. That's the word I was looking for. King Herod wanted to seek him to kill him because so the story that the church says anyway is that, Satan was stirred up to try to kill all the firstborn. And so he was trying to kill Jesus after Jesus was born. Okay. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So Satan was stirred up to kill Jesus when he was a baby because he wanted to stop Jesus's work. So pretty much you're saying the same thing as like Satan wanted to destroy An Sang-ho, first of all, from being born and also from having his name be out there because he was God, right? Yeah. Anyway, so that was very, I feel like I'm not explaining it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I know what you're saying because I know the teaching. So part of the doctrine of your church.
Okay, let me just explain this and then I'll go back and talk about it when I explain the church. How's that? So they were forced to have Japanese style names instead of Korean names. So they just wanted to wipe out the whole Korean language and Korean culture and all that, make it Japanese. They got newspapers, magazines in Korean were banned. So after World War II, after 1945, Japanese fell or whatever, right? So Korea got its independence back. But then after that, well, they're not really independence.
No, wait, sorry. I think you should also point out that the Japanese were also forcing Shinto on them, the religion. Shinto is like the traditional Japanese philosophy. Is like their version of like religion through like the Japanese culture.
Right.
And so that was why so many people at that time were flocking to Christianity, because they didn't want anything to do with the Japanese.
Right.
Because Shinto was being forced on them by like the Japanese occupation.
Sure. Yeah. So after the Japanese occupation, then they were like, we don't want anything to do with Japan.
Yeah.
We don't want anything to do with China, the Soviet Union, or anything. So who did they look to? Good old Americans and good old Western culture and Western religion. And so, yeah, like you said, they just really like clung to that as a way of just getting away from the Japanese occupation. So there's a whole long story about Korean history. And then eventually in 1953, the UN, they signed the armistice, which is where they made that agreement between North and South Korea that technically they're still in a war between North and South Korea, but, they have like an agreement that they're not going to, physically fight right now.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like in a pause, in a break. But anyway, so they have like a ceasefire right now. But Christianity in Korea is so prominent. I mean, everywhere you go, there is literally a Christian church on every single like street corner. There are crosses all over the place, because after 1945, that was just the religion. Catholicism in Korea is huge. So during that time, there was extreme poverty. That from like that 1910, from that time, 1945, extreme poverty, extreme like cruelty. So what was happening is that people were growing up with apocalyptic beliefs. They were growing up thinking that the end of the world was imminent, because to them it was, like if you think about, 1920s, 1930s, there was like no media. There was not no media, but like, they had like,
they were in their like isolated.
Yes, very, very isolated state.
They were occupied by Japan.
Mm-hmm.
They were, yeah.
No information coming in. So a lot of these people grew up believing that they were living in the end of the world, which I think is important, because during that time, a lot of people came out, a lot of men came out proclaiming themselves as messiahs. So I want to kind of just give you guys an idea of some of these people that came out, and then we're going to talk very specifically about 3 of the main churches in Korea that are very dominant. But so many men were born during this time in Korea that came out as apocalyptic Bible teachers and started their own, quote unquote cults. So we have Sun Myung Moon. So he's a leader of the Moonies, and we're going to talk about him. He was born in 1920 in Korea. We have An Sang-hong. He was born in 1918. He's the leader of the Church of God. We have Lee Man-hee. He was born in 1931, and he's the leader of Shin Chun-ji. We're going to talk about that more. And then we have Yu Byung-yeon. He actually got the domain for God.com, which is hilarious. He founded an evangelical Baptist church. And he was actually born in Japan in 1941, but all of his work was done in Korea. So he moved over to Korea and did all of his, cult work over there. And so he was like a business guy. And he actually went to jail, I think, for all kinds of money fraud and money laundering. In 1987, he was connected to a mass suicide in Seoul. And so that was really interesting. And then I don't know if you remember this, in 2014, a ferry capsized in Korea, and it ended up being a business that he owned, that was owned by him. And like he was cutting all these corners and not following the rules. And I think he got in trouble for that too.
I remember when that happened, because you were in the church and you were like, see, the world of the eyes of the world are on Korea right now.
Right.
It was like a big deal that something like a tragic and big had happened there, and that everybody was like talking about the news in Korea at the time.
I want to go back to that point, okay, because that's a good point. Yeah, so that's him. So he's very corrupt. And then you have Ok-soo Park. He was born in 1944 in Seoul, and he started the Good News Mission. And he wrote a book called The Secret of Forgiveness of Sins and Being Born Again. And the reason why that is important is because An Sang-hong also wrote a book. I don't know. No, actually didn't write a book, but one of their main studies is called The Secret of Forgiveness of Sins. Exactly the same word. So I thought that was really interesting. Then we have David Yonggi Cho, and I'm sure that I am just not even saying these words correctly. Please forgive me. He was born in 1936, and he actually died recently in September 2021. He was a co-founder with his mommy. Well, I'm sorry, with his mommy-in-law, his mother-in-law, of it's called the Yoido Full Gospel Church, part of Assemblies of God, and it is the world's largest Christian congregation, the world's largest Christian congregation. They have they say they have over 830,000 members. So they also have a lot of mega churches in Korea, huge mega churches. And this Pentecostal megachurch is worth millions and millions of dollars. So this is a very profitable business for these people. Okay, so, and here's another one, Na Ong Mong. He was born in 1914. He died in 2009. He founded the Young Moon Sun Prayer Mountain, and he also proclaimed himself to be Christ. This later turned into the Olive Tree Church, which I think is still prominent out there. So this is a handful of men who were born around that time of Japanese occupation, started these apocalyptic groups. Okay, so let me read you. I want to read you guys like a list of all these things that I generally found to be similar between all of those churches. Okay, let me just read you a quick look. Okay, they're all apocalyptic. They're all Bible-based Christian churches. Okay, that's a main thing. Bible-based, okay? Focusing repetitive Bible study, campus evangelizing. That is something that is very prominent. Campus evangelizing, Revelation, studying prophecy, studying about 144,000, having some kind of church organization, like there's a pastor, there's a deacon, there's a missionary, there's, regular members like that. Early prayers, having feasts and having some type of ceremonies that they all do together, focusing on globalization and spreading the message throughout the whole world. A lot of them really wanted to go to America and spread their message in America, and really military strict style. So these are some of the things that I just thought was fascinating, that every single one of these things, they just all sort of follow this same style. It's crazy.
I think this historical study for you is so important for your process of leaving. I feel like this is like the thing that did it for you as you came out, because and it's different for everybody, like what it is that's going to really like comfort them. But I feel like this is comforting to you to find this all out, because you've been told and thought for so long like your church is the only true. And as I've seen you sort of like research this and study it, it's good. It's like rewiring your brain to say like so many different religions have so many of the same concepts that your church has, that it makes your church like feel less special.
I'm telling you, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked.
This is like so huge for you. Like this is like your process of consuming all of the historical knowledge that you can of all of these.
Yes, it is so, because when you're in there, you think that you're chosen by the one and only true God of the Bible that has been there for 6,000 years, like you just feel so special and so chosen. And let me tell you why they're so brilliant, because they group all the churches as Babylon. And I'm doing a quote, okay? Do you know what Babylon is?
Yeah, I do.
Right. Well, there was like an actual literal Babylon and like a physical Babylon. There's a spiritual Babylon, which is really just controlled by the devil, deceiving all the people. Anyway, in their eyes, Babylon is any church that pretty much is not keeping the Sabbath day and not keeping the Passover and all that. So that's all the Christian churches. So when you're in there, you automatically, like, you don't really research cults because in your opinion, they're all cults except for you. So like, you don't really research the Moonies or Shincheonji or any of these churches because when you're in there, they're all the same. Shincheonji is the same as the Catholics, as the same as the Baptists, is the same as Pentecostal. Like, they all look the same because they're all Babylon. Do you know what I mean? So like, you never actually, like, you're like, yeah, I've heard of the Moonies. Yeah, they're a cult, like, that's just kind of what you say because they don't keep Sabbath day. But like, you never actually investigate their doctrine until you leave, like, you're never really given that opportunity. So then when I got out and then I saw like really specific things about their doctrines, I was like, oh my God,
it's the same.
They're using exactly the same Bible verses.
They're so similar.
And you guys, next time we're going to do another episode about other cults outside of Korea. So we're going to talk about like, I want to talk to you guys about Armstrong Church. And Herbert Armstrong, because a lot of his doctrines are very, very similar.
Yeah, that was fascinating. That's an American church.
Yeah.
I haven't heard about that until like 2 days, like over the weekend. And I was like, what the heck? This is so weird. Because, obviously the Korean churches are so similar, but to find a like American-based church that follows so much of how your church was, that was really, that was really interesting. Right. But yeah, so many. I mean, all of the cult.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about Waco, Seventh-day Adventist, all that stuff, because those are all, it's the same exact thing. But specifically in Korea, I was just shocked when I saw, all these things happen. So do you want to talk about some of these churches? You guys, I'm just going to tell you the history of the church that I was in. I'm just going to talk about the history, okay? All of this is available online. You can look at the history, but I think it's important.
Go to Google Scholar and put in the name of the church, which will give you.
So let me tell you about the founder, because I think that for the context of the history, it's important to understand. An Sang-hong was born in 1918 in Korea, okay? And he was born to Buddhist parents. So he's born in the middle of this, of this persecution and poverty. I mean, extreme poverty, extreme poverty. Born to Buddhist parents. And then when he got older, he went to the Seventh-day Adventist church with his mom and stayed there for a long time. So he was heavily influenced by Seventh-day Adventist church teachings, which we're going to talk about later. Later, he was excommunicated from the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 1962, apparently because of his beliefs about idolatry. I think it was because of his beliefs about a lot of other things, but he had a strong belief that crosses are idols, and so they didn't like that. And so he was excommunicated, and he established his own church in 1964. And at that time, the church was called Witnesses of Jesus Church of God. That was the name of the church. Okay. Then in 1985, he died unexpectedly. He died. And when he died, there was a division in the church. So his wife, An Sang-hong's wife, and his children, they kept all of An Sang-hong's writings and teachings, because he wrote many books when he was alive. And they started the New Covenant Passover Church of God. Well, there were other people in the group after he died, Ju Cho Kim and Zong Gil Ja. Okay, Ju Cho Kim is a general pastor. Zong Gil Ja she was a missionary at that time, but they had a meeting in Seoul after he died, and they decided that Zong Gil Ja would be called Mother God, and that she would be mother. They believed that An Sang-hong taught that she was God the Mother, and that Ju Cho Kim would be the general pastor. And then they named that church Witnesses of An Sang-hong Church of God. So there was a break in the church after he died. And when I'm researching these other churches, I'm seeing that that's very common for there to be, after somebody dies, after the leader dies, and they're like, oh shit, now what do we do? So that's what happened. Then in the late 1990s, they actually changed their name again, a third time, to World Mission Society Church of God.
She did it. There you go. You did it.
That's the name of the church, because they changed their mission. So now they were going to have a global, worldwide mission. So from the 1990s, I think like late 1990s, 1997, 1998, that's when they came to America. That's when they started their like worldwide preaching all over the world. And so since then, they've just been, they've just been going strong and setting up their churches all over, setting up house churches and like that. So that's the history of the church. Now, Zhang she's pretty old. She's in her, I think, late 70s. So what will happen when she dies, I do not know. I don't
think she's older, Toni. I think she's like 80.
Maybe.
Because she was in her 70s, early 80s when I used to point it out to you, like, do you think that they'll tell you guys when she does die?
Right.
What will you do if she does die and the church keeps going? Like, will you leave then? Because I was very curious to, like, what they're going to do, too. That was my worry, is that she would die and they would be able to get,
But they never talk about that. Like, even though it seems like a good... Right. Even though it's a good question, like who's going to take over after she dies. The whole point is that 144,000 are supposed to go to heaven alive with God. So I think the insinuation is that she will not die. But also, the insinuation was that An Sang-hong would not die. I mean, there's a lot of things, but he wrote a book they called the Green Book, and in that one of the chapters in that book, he talks about how 144,000 will go alive in this generation with God, but then he died. And so that's very interesting. And then they actually ended up taking that chapter out of the book and then republishing the book. And there's all different newer versions of the book. So,
I just realized something. While you were in the church, did you know about the division of An Sang-hong's family and mother? You didn't know that?
So I didn't know that until when there was a deaconess that came out. We had the meetings about her. We've talked about it before. Some of our guests have called it the Great Exodus. It was like around 2011, 2012, but that was one of her things that she discovered, because the New Covenant Passover Church of God has the rights to An Sang-hong's material, like legally. And so when you go to their website, they have all of his information. And so that's shocking, because you're like, that's our God. That's our Christ. That's our Savior. Why does that church have it on there? So we were really confused. So then, of course, there's an answer for everything.
Yeah.
So, our pastor got us together and explained. And then after that, it wasn't really a secret anymore. They just explained it, and, they can explain it.
What do they say? Just like it's Babylon. They're like twisting Father's word.
Well, no, they just explain it as, they just explain like the division that happened and how they didn't believe that he was God, but Mother did believe, and so we stayed with Mother, and that was like prophecy in the Bible.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's the history of that church. Do you have any questions about that one? Like I'm your teacher.
I do have one more question.
Yeah.
So I found out in my research that that your church would celebrate his birthday, death day, God the Father Day, and then Memorial Days. And so I don't remember if you've ever explained to me
Okay, well, I don't know about
days.
Okay. So they would celebrate the day of his birth. Like it would be like a commemoration service commemorating his birth. And I remember that we would usually do like some kind of volunteer activity on that day to like commemorate his birth. We would do something like that. And we would have a service. So they would just have a service where you go, but it could be like on a Tuesday, it could be on a Wednesday, some random day, and you have to be there at 9 a.m., go to the service.
Yeah, was it the same day every year, like an actual birthday, or was it just randomly like today's?
No. So they would go by the sacred calendar.
Oh.
Everything is done by the biblical calendar. Right. So we didn't really have like a set. That's a really good point, which I never even thought about. Like he actually had to have had like a set birthday, right? Yeah. But I don't think that, no, we celebrated it all, I think, by the biblical calendar. I think it's been a while, but I'm pretty sure. Same with Mother. And then as far as like his death, so they don't call it death. They call it his ascension.
Okay.
His ascension. But ascension means that like he went to heaven alive. Like they believe like Jesus ascended, quote unquote, because his body went to heaven and like, you know, he left the tomb and like he didn't have a body anymore and his body went to heaven, right? The whole thing is like An Sang-hong died and he's buried and like he's buried next to his wife. There's a tomb and everything. You can go visit it, but they call it ascending. And so they'll have a special holy ceremony for that day too. And they fast on that day too.
Okay.
Because the Bible says on the day that Christ leaves us, on that day we should fast. So the day that Jesus was crucified, they also fast. So that's part of the feast.
Okay.
Is the day that he was crucified. So like right before Passover, which people celebrate Easter.
Good Friday. No.
Yeah, they call it Good Friday, which is weird. Yeah, but the day that Jesus was crucified,
Good Friday. That's
a fast, and the same thing. Yeah. So it's pretty much just services, and then the day that An Sang-hong revealed Mother, like as a commemoration of that time, that supposedly, you know, he pointed that she was Mother. They have Heavenly Parents Day, and so that's another day that you have to have off work to come for a service. And then that day you have maybe like some special like performances or something like that. Yeah. Okay, so that's the history of the Church of God, okay? I want to talk about the Unification Church just a little bit. There's so much information out about this church. So this was founded by Sun Myung Moon. And it's also known as the Moonies. They're also known as the Moonies, but their actual name is the Unification Church. And they call him the Reverend Moon. They would call him Reverend Moon. He died in 2012, but they would call him Reverend Moon. They believe that he was, you know, second coming Messiah, that he was a second coming Messiah. You guys might have seen them. They're really famous for having mass weddings. Have you ever seen the mass weddings? Like, I think they had a mass wedding at like Madison Square Garden and these huge arenas, and he will literally just match people up to be married. And they believe, so what's interesting about them is they believe that he is father and that his wife is mother. So they also have a father and a mother. They call themselves true father and true mother, and they're, you know, those are their children. And that's also what the Church of God, I mean, so exactly the same.
Yeah.
Do you know that they own the Washington Times?
I do know that now.
Yeah, they own the Washington Times. They have really strong political influence. So they think they started in Korea and then just, you know, they wanted to spread throughout the world. So here they are. They came to America. They went worldwide. And then in America, they just, you know, has so much political influence, especially like right-wing influence. And they said that even on January 6th last year, there were a lot of people from the Unification Church at the Capitol at the insurrection. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So they're like right-wing extremists, and they have been for a long time. Like they've been, you know, influencing politics a long time. Mm-hmm.
That's so fascinating that you say right-wing, because when I hear the Moonies, I sort of like put that in the box of the like the new age, like 60s, 70s, like the hippies. And I don't know if that's accurate or not.
That's true. No, you're absolutely true.
In that moment, in that movement where everybody was kind of clinging to like the newest, most interesting or like different religion to become part of.
Yep, that's exactly what happened. So they spread in the 70s, like really started spreading in the 70s after the hippie movement. But yeah, they're right-wing extremists. I don't know if they started off as that way, but yeah, I think they were always political though. But yeah, they have been right. I think they were. I feel like Reagan and Nixon maybe.
Yeah, like invited them in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So actually last night, to prepare for this episode, I watched a documentary. It was called Blessed Child. It's on Prime. I had to rent it, but it was really good. And it's about a woman leaving the Unification Church. And I wrote down some things that were really similar to to the Church of God, you know. Another thing about them is that they're really anti-LGBTQ. That's something that, you know, they're really against, and, you know, they want you to really like pray it away or like, you know, repent for that, stuff like that.
Blame.
And, yeah. But when I watched this, so this lady's name is Kara Jones, and she shows her life in the Unification Church and coming out of it. And it's really sad because she's leaving her family. Her family is in it. Her parents are really in it. But there were so many similarities. So they would kneel when they pray, and she would talk about how the closer they were to the floor, the more holier they were. And that is something that we would do, but that's something from Korea style, like praying on your knees, like earnestly praying on your knees is something that we would also do. And that's something that they would do too. So I thought that was really interesting. And like, also, like you said, like growing post-hippie, so they were really idealistic, believing that everybody could live together. No racism. Everybody can live together with one God, all the nations believing in one God.
And that's so counterintuitive to me to be then conservative right-wing insurrectionists. Like those things don't jive in my brain. The hippie movement and the insurrection.
Well,
like the polar opposites of each other.
Maybe to you, but maybe I'm not saying, but I'm saying like the conservative people of the 1970s are different than the extreme radicals of now. And I think that maybe they just evolved over time with them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I mean, they're freedom loving, you know, that's why. And so they also call you.
Not like self-freedom.
Right. For sure.
Because when I think of freedom, I think of like freedom to like live your life truly free. And I guess that does, I guess I'm having a moment of conflict in my brain of those two. That my version of that in my head.
See, I don't think that they were hippies, though. I think they were coming out of the hippie era. Okay. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they're coming, because this is the 1970s, so they're coming out of that. This is the cult that Steve Hassan came out of.
Yeah.
The cult leader that we talked about that created the bike model. So they're coming out of the hippie time, more of like, you know, psychedelic time.
Yeah.
I don't know why it happened, but yeah. So they also call each other brothers and sisters. The children were left a lot. You know, in the church so that the parents could do mission work, which is also similar. They do a lot of repetitive Bible studies over and over and over and over and over again. Strong Korean culture. They have their own like special language, special culture. And you know what I noticed? They have a lot of banners. Huh. And the Church of God has a lot of banners too. Like every time there's an event, there'll be a big banner. You know, we would have to create all these big banners. We would make them, and it was so crazy. But I noticed that too. So there's so many similarities of these churches. Okay. Then, do you want to say anything else about them?
Yeah. So were they the ones in the 1980s? Was there also? So when I was researching your church when you first went in, mm-hmm. I confused the 1987 suicide. And so that was the Moonies that happened in?
No. So that was the other one. That was the Evangelical Baptist Church. The Young
church that was actually I thought it was your church that happened. Mm-hmm. And it really scared me because I was like, well, it already happened. So for a little bit I thought that you got like your church had a suicide.
No. But it's so funny because when we would go preaching, they would say, "Oh, you guys are the Moonies," and I'd be like, "We're not the Moonies. They're a cult. They're crazy."
And now you're like, "Oh wait, we believe in literally almost."
Yes, almost exactly the same thing. And then when you see like their videos and stuff, and it's just so exactly similar. I mean, it's so crazy. It's so interesting. Like even the way An Sang-hong and Sun Myung-moon, like the way that they look, the way that they carried themselves, the way that they spoke, it's so similar. It's interesting. Is there any
like evidence of them overlapping, like meeting each other or knowing each other?
I don't know. That's a really great question. Not that I've come across. Right? But see, An Sang-hong was really into the Seventh-day Adventist, which is a little bit different than like the regular Christians. So I don't know that he would have gone in the same circles. I'm not exactly sure. Another thing that the Moonies believed was that Reverend Moon and his wife were the last Adam and the last Eve, like second Adam and second Eve, which was one of our main Bible studies in the Church of God. So when I heard that, I was like, what?
Yeah.
That's our Bible study, so it's interesting. And then there's another one that is very similar. That's Shincheonji, and that is getting a lot of heat lately in the news. So you guys might have heard of this. So this one is founded by Lee Man-hee, and he's still alive. He's in his 90s. And he established this church in 1985 in Korea. He claims he's the Messiah also, that he's Christ. And they focus on prophecy. They focus on revelation a lot. They focus on apocalyptic Bible study. They're very secretive. So you have to go to like a 6-month Bible class. I think it's 2 or 3 times a week. They're very intrusive in your life. They're very controlling in your life. And they do a lot of like really creepy, secretive things, kind of try to trick the people into who's a member, who's not a member. It's all very yucky. And then after 6 months, they finally tell you who they are. So you study with them for 6 months before even knowing which church you're studying with. And then after 6 months of hearing their teachings, then they tell you who they are, and then I think you get back. So they have a video just kind of showing how they spread throughout the whole world and stuff. And when I saw that video, it was exactly the same kind of production that the Church of God would have put on, and it's just mind-blowing. It is just mind-blowing how similar it is.
So,
but they're in
jail right now?
He's not in, I don't think he's...
He either went to jail or is like pending going to jail.
Yeah, so he also got in trouble for, money fraud and stuff like that. I don't know the details of it, but...
And spreading COVID at the beginning.
And spreading COVID, yeah. So that's what they're in trouble for.
Yeah.
Is because they have big, huge mass, gatherings. They also have feasts and ceremonies that they have to celebrate. And so I think in the beginning of COVID, they weren't wearing masks. They were still gathering in large groups, and COVID just spread throughout their churches.
They linked a bunch of the original cases in South Korea to that gathering.
Right.
Government was like, we need a list of all of your members, and the guy was like, I'm not doing that. And that was why he got in trouble, because he wasn't providing them with the tracing information to go back and say, we need to know who was there so that we can
It's definitely stricter in Korea than here, Here they're like, oh, you might have been exposed. We don't know.
Yeah.
Just stay home for 5 days in case.
Yeah.
It's funny. But yeah, so that was very, you know what I did want to talk about? The Unification Church. Well, let's go back to the Unification Church, because after Sun Myung Moon died, there was a division in his church also. So after he died, he kind of gave authority to one of his sons. His name is Hyung Jin Sean Moon. They call him Sean. Pastor Hyung Jin Sean Moon. And he started his own church, you guys, sort of like a branch off of the Unification Church, and it's called the Sanctuary Church. But then there was also a branch of people that stayed as the Unification Church. So they are very intense. So they read the book of Revelation as kind of like a call of action and like an army call. And when they read it, there's this part in the book of Revelation that talks about rod of irons, and they believe that those are guns. And so they bring their guns to their church every time that they come to church, and they bless their guns, and they wear crowns of bullets. And they believe, that he is, the new Christ, and she is the new mother, I guess. And so they sort of still follow the teachings, I think, of the Unification Church, but it's more, intense. And then you add in some guns and some weaponry and some ammunition. What you got?
It's more violent.
Yeah, so that one is really, really, really crazy. And you can see how they progress, over time. But so Lee Man-hee, he is in his 90s, and he will die soon. And what will happen, I'm not exactly sure. Didn't you say that they had somebody lined up to take over when he died?
Yeah, Kim Nam-hee. I don't know if that's a man or a woman.
Yeah, so they do have a plan for him.
Yeah, what I read about their doctrine is that he's God, that the world has already ended, and we're in Revelations right now. And then he's like the prophet who overcomes in Revelations. And that he's not supposed to die, but they're right now switching power to Kim Nam-hee.
And he's not supposed to, but just in case he does,
they have somebody like lined up to take over because he's getting old. But he's not supposed to. Like, they have been teaching that he's not going to, because we already are like we're like in Revelation. But they compare this church to the Islamic, like how the Islamic State in the Middle East is. Call it the Christian state in Korea.
That's crazy. That's so extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so interesting, you know, all these similar groups, similar times in history, under the same kind of apocalyptic influence, you know, and it's like, I don't know. It's interesting.
Was there one more that you had that you wanted to talk about, or the three you had?
Those are the three main ones. Yeah. I just want to put this information out there for any, you know, current members or members that are leaving, because like you said, for me, this was just so like mind blowing and eye opening, you know, to see like, oh my God, they're also claiming to be 144,000. Like, to me, I just didn't think that was happening. I don't know why. I didn't think that other people were believing in Father and Mother.
Follow that, right? Is that Jehovah's Witness? That's like one of their big doctrines, is the 144,000.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So let me explain something that I kind of was talking about earlier. All of these churches are very proud of their Korean foundation. They all believe that it's a sign that they are the truth. And they use these verses in the Bible saying that Christ will come from the east. There's a lot of references in the Bible about the east, the far east. And so every single one of these, you know, preachers, they use it to justify the reason why they are the Christ, why they are the truth. And see, after 1945, Korea exploded economically in every way. You know, they were just able to grow so quickly. I mean, their economy grew so fast. When you go to Korea and you see how advanced they are in their technology and their capabilities and their education, it's amazing. And so they believe that that's a sign of God, that is a sign that God chose them, and that God chose that specific person and that specific prophet. And that, like, because remember how you said, like, when the ferry capsized, and I was like, look, all eyes are on Korea. Like, every time something happens in Korea, every time anything happens in Korea, it's a sign that, you know, the whole world's eyes are on Korea. And so, you know, everybody is seeing God's glory unwittingly. Like, the Olympics were in Korea, so that was a huge big thing. And then whenever like K-pop is mentioned, that's a huge big thing. Or even like the Squid Games, I heard that they were like talking about the Squid Games and how like that gave them so much like you know, popularity of Korean culture. But we were like, did you ever watch Squid Games? Which I didn't, you know, but I heard it's extremely violent.
Yeah. It was a Chad who was like, I feel like they probably didn't watch Squid Games.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Like,
that's right.
Yeah, I think it was Chad we were talking about that. And he's like, yeah, if they watched it, I don't know that they would be as proud to claim it as like, look see, it's like bringing attention.
For sure. So that's something similar in every single one of them, that they, you know, use the Bible to justify why Korea is blessed.
But if you look at the history of it and you take away like the actual, if you look at it just from a historical point of view, it makes sense now, like how these crazy, I'm using quotes, like these crazy doctrines came out of it, because, you know, they were introduced to this fairly new concept of Christianity. They come from, you know, thousands of years of their own religion that sort of like includes the people, and also like the female version of it. There's a lot of there's a lot of femininity in like the Eastern religions and like the tribal shamanism, like the shamanistic like religions. And so you can see how they intertwined their own version of theology into Christianity, and how how it's like an Eastern / Christian concept now.
Right.
So yeah, and when you can see like why it took off was like the Japanese, trying to force their culture on them, and they're just like, well, we don't want that. Let's like take on this other concept.
Totally different, right? And they just loved it. And it's so interesting when you go to Korea, they love you. Like even people that don't belong to the church, like when they see, and maybe not so much anymore, but when I went like years and years ago, I don't know, because there's not a lot of foreigners in Korea. There really isn't. So when they see foreigners, they are really surprised, and like they really appreciate you, and they want to talk to you, and they want to know you and everything, and it's really cool. They're really interested in you. But see, in America, we're used to like walking down the street and seeing all different kinds of people. And I remember I was with this really, really beautiful African-American girl, and she was so tall and so beautiful, but I felt so bad because they would take pictures of her just randomly walking down the street because they had never, seen somebody of her color and her size and her beauty before, So it was really interesting. And I think it's important to remember all of these things when we're contemplating our salvation, like don't put all your trust into a religion until you really understand the historical context of it and, why it was founded in the first place and all the history of where your church comes from. I think it's important.
Yeah. And when they like go out of their way to like keep some of that secret, then you got to wonder like why. That's not.
Well, see, one of the main Bible studies is that the true church is called the Church of God. So, the Church of God, and that's all that you're taught. So we're taught that our church is called the Church of God. So then when you hear that the church had different names, you're like, what the hell? And see, I was in the church for at least 10 years before I heard any of this. Yeah. And it's like, why was it hidden for so long? If it has an explanation, then like it shouldn't be a big secret. You know what I mean?
That's cray. Cool. I love it. So if anyone has any like more information about this, or
if you guys are interested in hearing more, we could do more research, but we could talk about this for days.
Yeah. Send us an email if we like said something incorrect, or we're going off of like the few like scholarly articles. We tried to go as like as legit research as we could.
And listen, it's not easy to get information from 1918 Korea, okay? Like,
yeah.
There's been Japanese control, and then a Korean War, and all kinds of things that have happened. So it's hard to get information. But as a broad general idea, this is sort of, the history of all these different religions that came out of there.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And I know that we're leaving so much out. There's so much to talk about, but I think that it really puts it into perspective, and puts it into context of, where these people are coming from.
Yeah. So, girl, I think we covered like the basic.
Yeah.
You want to announce like our up and coming stuff?
You guys, we have an announcement. So this is our season opener, and we opened it just talking about the church, okay? And I am scared of any type of backlash, but listen, we're not doing anything wrong. I'm just telling my story. I have a right to tell my story. I'm not slandering anybody or whatever. One of the things, you guys, that I am really, really sad about, and I know I talk about it all the time, but I'm just really missing people there a lot. I'm missing my pastor and his wife, which is so interesting because they were really the ones that caused a lot of damage to me, but they're also ones that showed me a lot of love, and like I really miss them. I was really close to them. I miss them a lot. I've been missing them a lot lately. Anyway, so that's something that's heavy in my heart lately. But back to what we're talking about this season, we're going to have a lot of things happening, and we're going to be doing a lot of new interviews with, we have a few interviews lined up. And last season we talked to people who were really far along in their process, their journey of life after a cult. I think this next season we're going to speak to people who are in all kinds of levels of their process, you know, people who are newly out, people who've been out for years. So it's going to be interesting to talk to them, hear their stories.
And we're going to talk to people who were like never even in the church, but
are
to this in a different way.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
One of our up and coming interviews that we got.
Yeah. So another thing, you guys, we're going to do a book club because we just love books and it's our podcast and we can do whatever the heck we want to do. The other day, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts. It's called 10% Happier with Dan Harris. Have you ever heard of that one? Dan Harris, he's a famous journalist. He was a TV anchor and he had a panic attack on live TV. I think he was on Good Morning America. He had a panic attack and he is really open about his struggles of anxiety. And he started a podcast called 10% Happier. And he had these guests on and they're sisters. Their names are, and I might pronounce it wrong, Emily and Amelia Nagoski. I think it's Nagoski.
Nagasaki.
They're sisters, and they wrote this book together. It's called Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And when I heard him talking on this podcast, I was like, oh my God, we have to read this book.
Sisters. I love that they're sisters. They're like polar opposites. Like one is like a teacher, and one is a doctor.
Right.
I just read it. I can't remember what they were. But anyways, they're like polar opposite, like professionally, which I love.
And they're hilarious. I think it's pretty funny.
I didn't hear them talk, but I like that they wrote this book together.
Yeah, the book is pretty funny. Yeah, so if anybody wants to pick up a copy, it's called Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. We'll post it on our page, on our pages. Yeah, and let's read this book. Yeah, I just started it last night.
Me too. And then also Toni and I are going to be on a different podcast. In March, coming up in a few months. We're going to individually do a podcast, which is going to be interesting because I don't know what I'm going to say without Toni.
Oh my gosh, you guys, I am so excited. I don't know how much we're allowed to talk about it, but it's one of my favorite cult podcasts, and we're going to be on it. We're going to have 2 episodes, and I'm so excited. The girl who hosts it is amazing. She's amazing. Okay, you guys, the name of her song, the name of Amani's song is Watch Me Still Continue On Growing. Watch Me Still Continue On Growing, and we're going to play it for you guys, exclusive right here. Yeah, so keep listening. Do you got anything else that you want to say? Or? I don't think so. We're going to see you guys soon. Our next interview is later this week. I'm really excited. Yeah, we'll see you guys soon. Have a great week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for making this so much more fun than we originally had planned. We made this podcast thinking like 10 of our family members would listen, and it's just been so exciting to see it grow from there. Yeah. And email us if you're listening from out of the country, because that's just that'd be cool. I don't know anybody in New Zealand. I don't know anybody in Canada. Malaysia. Don't know anybody there. Belgium. We found out who's listening in Poland. What's up? Yeah. Shout out family. Yeah, love that. Our cousins. Our cousin and his wife are in Poland right now. Yeah. And they're listening. Exciting. So that's cool to see them pop up on our little like geography thing. I'm like, that's pretty cool that we know that. Yeah. Well, everybody be safe, okay? Wear your mask. Be safe. Get vaxxed if you want. I'm not forcing you. Just if you want. You just should. Okay, for humanity. All right, girl. I'll talk to you later. Everybody enjoy the song. Toni, how did it take us an entire season to get political here? Right? It's only taken this long. Yeah, wait, I got so much more to say on that. I'm just kidding. All right. All right. Boom, baby. God, why can't I think of this story? I think I did get kind of high. Hold on. Da 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 la 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 la. La 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 la. La ti ta ti ta. La 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 la. I think you scared my dog with your singing. Do something. Beep 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 beep. Is that annoying? Does that help you though?
Sometimes. Not with my singing that I was doing earlier.